Hello there everyone, Nubkeks here, and in today's video we're taking a look at the Demonology Warlock spec on the Shadowlands beta for World of Warcraft. Over the last couple of days we looked at the Affliction Warlock and the Destruction Warlock, and we've already looked at several classes and specs already, and over the next couple of weeks we're going to be looking at all of the remaining specs and classes here on the channel. So lots of Shadowlands beta content coming your way, and more stuff in the future to come as well, of course. So yeah, definitely stay tuned for all of that stuff. But without any further ado, let's dive in and check out the demo lock. Alright, and here we are in game, guys. We're hanging out with Venthyr as a sight that would make Batman weep. A bunch of bats show the ground who is boss. Let's check out the Demo Warlock. Let's check out their core rotation, their basic gameplay. This is supposed to be the first section is especially for players who are new to the spec, looking for a new spec to pick up, or for players who want a bit of a refresher in terms of how the spec actually plays. Then after that, we'll go and we'll look at the specifically new things coming in Shadowlands, and then the talent changes, and then stuff like Conduits, Legendaries, Covenant abilities, all that good stuff. So yeah, let's dive into the core gameplay of the Demonology Warlock. And of course, I've just taken talents that are essentially active abilities, and I'm not going to press these. We're just going to look at the very, very baseline spec gameplay. How does it work? Well, okay, first of all, actually, let's talk about Venthyr over here, right? This is our pet. Just like all the warlocks, you can, of course, summon many different types of demons. However, the Felguard is unique to the Demonology Warlock, and pretty much, I'd say like 90-95% of the time, if not 100% of the time almost, you're gonna have this guy out, even more so because of some nerfs to the summoning speed, which we'll talk about in the what's new section. But I mean, he is there, he fights in melee, he's got a few abilities. He will charge in on a 15-second cooldown, so he will, charge at people, just get in range quicker. He does an attack that just cleaves in front of him, so he does some AoE, slightly reduces the healing that they receive by 10%. He will every 30 seconds do a Fell Storm, so he will just do a little Blade Storm thing that hits up to 8 targets, which is kind of nice. And then, of course, he has Axe Toss. This is a 30-second stun, and you can control this with your Command Demon ability. It also interrupts targets that are immune to stuns in Shadowlands. That's a new feature. But yeah, he's going to go in there, and he's going to... Look at him go. He's going to charge in, and he's going to spin to win. He's going to do his thing. So he's like, he is the best demon pet, and you get access to him. And you're going to, like I said, be using him nearly all the time. Now, we have these Soul Shards. So, Soul Shards, actually, you get a lot more of them as the Demonology Warlock compared to the other Warlock specs. That is because your filler ability, Shadow Bolt, which is a 1.7-second cast time, does about 240 shadow damage. This generates 1 soul shard every single time. It is a guaranteed soul shard generation. How are we going to spend our soul shards? Well, we have 2 abilities that are going to spend our soul shards baseline. First up, we have called Dread Stalkers. This has a 20-second cooldown and a 1.2-second cast time. You summon 2 ferocious Dread Stalkers. They jump in, and they're going to attack the target for 12 seconds. So we want to be using this on cooldown. This is baseline, our most efficient way to spend those soul shards. They are very good damage. And then we also have another soul shard spender, which is the Hand of Gul'dan. I'll talk about this proc in a second. The Hand of Gul'dan, though, you call down a demonic meteor full of wild imps, which burst forth to attack the target. Right, this spends 1 to 3 soul shards. You pretty much just want to spend it with 3, though. It does up to about 350 Shadow Flame damage on impact to all enemies within 8 yards of the target. No target cap on that as of yet, though it may come. We'll see. And it will summon up to 3 wild imps based on soul shards consumed. So you're going to spend this with 3. It's going to summon 3 wild imps. So if I show this to you here, Hand of Gul'dan, bonk, and these imps are going to pop out. The imps will stick around for a few seconds. You can see they... I'm not actually sure. You actually can't see it in the default UI. That's kind of weird. But they do have an energy, so they'll cast a number of these fell firebolts, which will do some damage, and then they will dissipate and disappear. We saw a proc there. That proc is going to enable us to cast Demon Bolt. So Demon Bolt, as you can see, has a massive cast time here, 3.7 seconds. It's huge. This does 500 Shadow Flame damage and generates 2 soul shards. In other words, it is essentially like double Shadow Bolt. It's like twice as good as a Shadow Bolt, and also has a cool casting animation. But the way that this is going to work is our passive. Okay, this is Demonic Core. When our wild imps expend all of their energy, or I explode them, we'll come back to that in a second, you have a 10% chance per imp to gain a stack of Demonic Core. When my summoned Dreadstalkers fade away, they are guaranteed to give me a stack of Demonic Core. and I can have up to 4 stacks of Demonic Core at a time. And what does Demonic Core do? It makes my Demon Bolt instant cast. So let's see if we can actually trigger some of this here. And essentially that's going to fuel like the main rhythm, right? We're going to generate 3. We're going to use our Fellstalkers on cooldown. We're going to do our Hand of Gul'dan. We're going to fill in with Shadow Bolt. And then to really speed up our rotation, what we're looking for is to get that... Here it is. There we go. Demon Bolt. Instant cast that Demon Bolt. We got a couple of them out, which is awesome. We're going to spend this now. Throw out our Dreadstalkers. The buff doesn't last insanely long, but you can see that this is going to, you know, essentially fuel the core rotation of your spec, right? And this is how you're going to get lots of imps out. And it's also going to give you a bit of movement because it's instant cast. As you can see, the other spells here all have cast times. But we want to try spend this relatively quickly because we don't want to get capped on our resources. Oops, I forgot with the Fellstalkers to cast them on cooldown, so that's a DPS loss. But you get the idea. We have another ability as well called Implosion. You throw in your imps and they explode, which is hilarious. This is Implosion. This is kind of like how you're going to do more AoE damage. Demonic Forces suck all of your wild imps toward the target and then cause them to violently explode, doing 228 Shadow Flame damage to all enemies within 8 yards, although it does do now in Shadowlands reduce damage to secondary targets, which kind of sucks. But anyways, I guess it's just to stop it scaling out of control in AoE. But yeah, essentially in AoE then, we're going to just, you know, we're going to keep... summoning our stuff as usual, but instead of just leaving my imps out to chill out, I can just simply fling them in to do some AoE damage, right? So yeah, that's going to fuel your AoE. Now there is another aspect of this. I want to cover this right now in the core rotation because your major cooldown as a Demonology Warlock is very much tied in to this core rotation, and that is the Summon Demonic Tyrant. It has a 1.5 minute cooldown, and it does have a cast time, which is quite unique amongst specs. I can't think of actually any other major cooldown that has a cast time. You summon a Demonic Tyrant to increase the duration of your current lesser demons by 15 seconds and increase the damage of all of your other demons by 15% while damaging your target. So essentially what we want to do, when we're going to get our Tyrant out, we want to have as many demons out as possible because he is going to empower them all up. He's going to make them last longer, and every demon that's out while the Tyrant is out is going to do more damage. And the Tyrant himself is also going to do lots of damage. And on top of that, this is an Azerite trait baked in baseline, coming from BFA into Shadowlands. It's now baseline. He also generates 5 soul shards, so he's going to enable you to try out tons of demons. So, I mean, typically speaking, we're going to go into the pull. Let's say we pre-pull with that, and we're going to throw out our Dreadstalkers there. We really want to get, you know, we might get maybe, let's actually do a 2-stack Hand of Gul'dan because I'm just nervous about getting this Tyrant out before my Dreadstalkers expire. Okay, there we go. And now we've got our Tyrant in, and he's going to do lots of damage. We're going to be able to summon lots of extra dudes. We're going to get lots of Demonic Cores now as well coming into this. We're going to do our Dreadstalkers next, get them out while he's out again. You can see we actually have 2 sets of Dreadstalkers out right now. There's 4 of them beating on the target, which is pretty awesome. And there we go. Our Demonic Cores starting to come in. Let's try to spend those. There we go. Yeah, a bit of movement here, which is nice. Lots of Demonic Cores, so giving us a real pace to the spec, as all of those things that we summoned in are enabling us to cast lots of spells. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty fun baseline rotation, and you're going to be building up to this Tyrant every minute and a half and throwing in those baseline summons. I very quickly do want to touch on, again, something that makes this a bit more interesting, which is, in fact, these are 2 of the talents I was running with. I want to point these out very quickly because they're quite fun. With the Tyrant, you can get more summons, right? You can get more summons. And what I was doing, I was playing with the summon Vile Fiend, which has a 1 soul shard cost and a 1.7 second cast, which summons a Vile Fiend. You can also summon another Felguard, a second one. So yeah, what I was doing was I was running with those. So again, that made for a really fun gameplay. And with Demonic Consumption, where the Demon Commander drains some life from all the demons and empowers himself. And that was very satisfying, where you're going into your summon Demonic Tyrant, and you're getting you want to get your Dreadstalkers out, your Vile Fiend, your Felguard, get a few Wild Imps out as well, then power them all up with the Demonic Tyrant, and they're all absolutely blasting, doing lots of damage. Pretty cool stuff, right? Pretty cool. But anyway, that's more of the talent stuff. We'll talk about that a bit later. But that's sort of the core stuff. There are some new things here, of course, that I will talk about in the What's New section. So if I'm skipping over any abilities, it's because they are new. But yeah, you have some nice utility and stuff as well. Actually, I should mention this very quickly. Your main defensive cooldown is Unending Resolve. A 3-minute cooldown gives you 40% damage reduction, so that is very, very cool. You have Fear. This is a spammable crowd control, right? So 1.4 second cast time. You can fear one enemy at a time. It won't work on target dummies, of course, but will disorient the enemy for 20 seconds and they'll run around. So that is some spammable CC. You also have an AoE stun in Shadow Fury, which is a 3-second AoE stun. We'll stun multiple things in AoE, which is cool. What else do we have? We've got lots of utility to bring to your raid group. So of course you can create your soul well, which party members can take health stones from, which of course restore 25% health. You can summon in a demonic gateway to give your raid some nice mobility stuff. We also have Demonic Circle as baseline now in BFA, which you can drop down your circle for yourself and teleport back to it. Every 30 seconds, I can return to my Demonic Circle, and I can replace that. Of course, you can do your summon, your Ritual of Summoning. You have your Soul Stone, which is a battle res, or you can preemptively put it on somebody if they're expecting to die, I suppose. And then, of course, we have Drain Life, where you can drain life from the target and heal yourself for some of the damage. It does very low damage and heals you for a nice little chunk of the damage dealt. Or you also have the health funnel, where you can sacrifice some of your max health to your demon. Although this, I can't use this right now because he's full health. But you can use that to top up your demon. Quite relevant, I guess, in PvP. And yeah, then some other nice stuff, like you can banish demons, aberrations, elementals. You can let people breathe underwater and swim a bit faster. If your Eye of Kilrog. You can enslave demons as well. I think I actually don't have that in my bar right now. Yeah, you can enslave demons, so that's kind of fun. And yeah, I think that's most of the core demonology stuff. That's the sort of the core gameplay rotation. Again, it's all about keeping your Dreadstalkers summoned on cooldown. Generate up to 3 soul shards, which you generate quickly with Shadow Bolt. Spend them on Hand of Gul'dan, and then the more imps and more demons you summon, the more procs you get on your Molten Core. The more demon bolts you can throw out, which are like twice as good as Shadow Bolt, so that really speeds up your rotation. It all feeds in together, and it's pretty cool. Summon then your big tyrant every minute and a half with as many demons as possible, and yeah, have fun. There you go. Alright guys, well, let us talk about now what is new in Shadowlands for the Demonology Warlock. What are you getting? There's a few things. I'm going to start with some bad news first, and then we have some good news coming after that. But the bad news, and this sucks, is that your demon summons, as you can see, I currently have 20% haste with this gear I have on right now. My demon summons are going to take 5 seconds. So it takes an awfully long time to summon your demon. Like, if my Felguard dies while I'm questing, or if he gets killed in PvP, I have to do a big 5-second cast to get my demon back, which takes an awfully long time. The semi-good news to make this a little bit better is that you do have a new ability called Fel Domination. Unfortunately, this does have a 3-minute cooldown, and this makes your next summon spell for your pet have its cast time reduced by 5.5 seconds. Now, this is weird with haste. I believe that the baseline speed for the summons is 6 seconds, which is rough. So this lowers it to 0.5 seconds. So you'll see that it's not going to make the Felguard summon instant, but instead be a 0.42 second cast. So that's how that works, right? So yeah, a little bit awkward. You know, as Demonology, you're so locked in, really, to your Felguard that it's very rare that you switch to these other pets. You're only going to very rarely switch to them for their additional utility. Like, they just don't do as much damage as the Felguard does. And some of your abilities are reliant, some of your talents especially, are reliant on having a Felguard. So that, you know, so you're not going to be switching like some of the other specs. It's going to suck for other Warlock specs. You know, if you got your tanky guy out, but you want to swap in someone that can kick. You know, it's just awkward with Fel Domination, so I'm not quite sure why they put this change in. I don't really understand why. Like, were Demonology Warlocks crushing in Mythic Plus? Were they crushing in PvP? No? So I'm not sure why they changed it, but anyway, they have changed it. We could give out about this for hours, though, so let's move on to some good news. Okay, some good news. Well, actually, let's start with one really fun thing, which is Demonic Circle. This is now just a baseline ability. This used to be a talent, no longer. So you can, every 10 seconds, you can do a quick cast to put down a Demonic Circle. And then with a 30-second cooldown, you can teleport to your circle, right? In fact, you can even do this through, like, line of sight. So over here, bam, hey, cool. I teleport to my circle. Awesome. This also removes all movement slowing effects. So really nice mobility tool. Very, very cool. Awesome for Arena. Like, so many plays you can make in Arena, and lots of plays you can make in the raids as well, and even in Mythic Plus a bit too. So fantastic to have that coming baseline. That's a very nice perk. We also now have curses have come back to the Warlock specs. So there are 4 curses baseline that you are going to have access to, and you can have 1 curse on a target at a time. We have the Curse of Tongues, which makes the target speak in Demonic, increasing the casting time of all of their spells by 30% for 30 seconds. The Curse of Weakness increases the time between an enemy's attacks by 20% for 2 minutes. The Curse of Exhaustion reduces their movement speed by 50% for 8 seconds. And then the Curse of Recklessness, this one's a bit weird. This makes them do more, 10% more physical damage. So it makes them stronger, but it also increases the physical damage they're going to take by 5% for 2 minutes. And it also makes them ignore fears, which means that you can't fear them, and stops them from running away. So maybe some utility in like Mythic Plus or whatever, if you got enemies that run away, you can stop them from doing that. This is going to be, obviously, I think, probably an important boss on most, important buff in most raid fights, and certainly like the Arms Warriors in your Mythic Plus group and stuff are going to be quite thankful for 5% more physical damage. Though there is, of course, the downside associated with it. You can't put the other curses on. So that's kind of interesting. It is worth noting that I believe Doom does not count as a curse anymore. That is a talent. It is a talent. Where is it? Over here. I think that's not a curse. So you can have Doom. In fact, we can test it right now, right? And there you go. In fact, we can see it exactly. Doom, it's not a curse, so you can have your baseline curses and Doom up at the same time if you want to take Doom, which you probably don't. But hey, if you do, then it's there. Okay, cool. We have a couple of also changes for the Demonology Warlock. And this one, I don't know, I probably put this one in the bad news section as well, because one of the biggest requests for Demonology Warlocks for the longest time has been, Blizzard, can we please have an interrupt? Warlocks are notorious for only being able to interrupt with the Fell Hunter. Please bear with me as I do my 5-second summon here. Isn't that fun? But yeah, Spell Lock. This is your interrupt. 24 seconds. You know, kick, interrupt spellcasting, and stop a spell being cast on that School of Magic. So very important for PvP, of course, and very important for Mythic Plus, of course, as well. Demonology Warlock is if you Fell Guard out all the time, and even more so with these summons and Fell Domination. Like, how are you going to kick stuff? So they've sort of half given you this with Axe Toss. So Axe Toss in BFA and previous expansions was a 30-second stun, right? Your Felguard throws his weapon and it stuns the target for 4 seconds. Now, this will also interrupt the target for 4 seconds. If they're stun immune, this now interrupts them. So that you can use this to kick bosses and stuff. However, it's on a 30-second cooldown. You know, it's going to stun just normal mobs instead, so it can trigger Stun Dior. You might not want to stun the mob. This will stun them. So this is quite awkward. Also, annoyingly, it has a travel time and a terrible animation, so it takes time for the thing to travel, to kick stuff. So this is a mixed thing. Like, on one hand, it's good that this now interrupts. I mean, that is kind of nice. It's kind of useful. But on the other hand, could we not just... You know, it's not like Demonology Warlock has been like it's not like it's a Resto Druid, like just absolutely dominating like Mythic Plus or something with its crazy utility. No. It's like, can we not just give Demonology Warlock just a kick? A 24-second cooldown kick? Is that too insane to ask for? Apparently it is. So, I don't know. Mixed bag. It's kind of nice that at least there's something, but it's really not what we would have wanted, I think. Implosion as well. This now does have a kind of a target cap feature. So this will hit as many targets as you want. This hits all enemies within 8 yards. However, it does do reduced damage to secondary targets. So this just means that compared to your melee classes, which are typically having target caps of like 5 to 6 targets, they can only hit a maximum of those. It just means that in AoE, the Demonology Warlock is not like, lol, I hit everything, haha, I do 1 billion times more damage than you do in AoE. It's kind of limiting that down. So a bit of a target cap there. So that is just something to watch out for. There are also a couple of very nice perks, though, with leveling for Demonology Warlocks. The first one I already have. In fact, I might have the first 2. In fact, I have the first 2. That's right. I'm level 54 now on the beta. The first one is a very, very awesome perk to summon Demonic Tyrant, which is that it now has the Baleful Invocation Azurite trait baked in the sense that Summon Demonic Tyrant now generates 5 soul shards for you. It fully fills up your soul shards, and that's just baseline, which is fantastic. So it means you're going into your Summon Demonic Tyrant window, you're going to want to spend all of your soul shards, summon in all of your demons, get to 0, then summon him in. He empowers all those demons that you summoned with the soul shards and refills them, so you can just go spend more This makes Summon Demonic Tyrant just baseline. Honestly, feel like, in my opinion, one of the best cooldowns in the game. It's just super fun to play around, and it makes it feel really rewarding. So that's a massive increase, a massive quality of life change for the Demo Warlock to get that baseline. So good job, Blizzard, on that one. That's a very welcome change. We also have a rank 2 to the Dreadstalker spell. Oh man, it's kind of baked in. It's baked in a baseline here. So what this does, I'm pretty sure that this makes them it makes them be faster to target swap. So if you target swap, they're going to move faster to the new target. So that's nice. And it also lowers the cast time as well, I think by half a second. So if you're, when you start off in Shadowlands, before you're level 54, this is going to have like a I think it has like by default a 2-second cast time reduced by haste. For me, with this talent, it goes down to I think 1.5 second cast time. Again, reduced by haste, like 1.2 second cast time. So that's a nice perk. Although I'll show you one of the talents that you're going to be running, which kind of makes them instant cast anyway. So it's more about the Dreadstalkers. Their AI is a bit better. They're going to target swap faster, and you won't lose as much damage. Like if I'm fighting this thing and it dies, or I want to swap to this thing, the Dreadstalkers, instead of sauntering over at the leisurely rate, will zip over a bit quicker. And then finally, there are rank 2 for your Fel Firebolt on your imps, your wild imps. Your wild imps will spend 20% less energy when casting Fel Firebolt. What this essentially boils down to is they're going to get 1 extra cast out. So it means that your imps are going to hang around for longer, and they're going to do 1 extra cast. So I think that's quite nice. It's going to help you get more imps out for your Demonic Tyrant. They're going to last longer during that. Fire off more firebolts. It's just a nice little perk. You can build up more imps for implosions. So yeah, I think it's a pleasant little change. Definitely a perk and a nice thing to have. So good changes there. All right, well, let's look at our talent tree, because there's a few changes in the talent tree. Not as much as the other Warlock specs, but still some nice buffs. This is, by the way, the talent build I was running for the dungeon footage that you're going to see coming up very, very soon. Okay, level 25, though, that we've got lots of changes here at level 25. Demonic Calling has been buffed. So this makes your Shadow Bolt and Demon Bolt have a 20% chance to make your next call Dreadstalkers cost 2 fewer soul shards and have no cast time. So this is a nice perk to the ability. So if we again, I'll fire them off here and we'll see it comes back in. Essentially what this is going to mean is that your first call Dreadstalkers, like you saw, unless you're very lucky, is probably going to cost you soul shards. But after that, it's going to be free. Literally costs 0 and is instant cast. So an absolutely phenomenal ability when this gets going. Very easy to use. You'll see it right here. I'm going to be at 0 soul shards. Bam, summon them in. And they go charging in. So no cost to it. In fact, instantly it procced the buff again, which is hilarious. We instantly got another Demonic Calling buff straight away after casting the first one. So this essentially is going to be up every single time. And it just makes the spec flow really smoothly. They have buffed the other 2 talents on this row, but I suspect that you are going to just be picking Demonic Calling all the time. Although I think, honestly, that's kind of fine, because it's a feels-good ability. It feels nice. Bile Scourge Bombers, by the way, I just noticed this. I was thinking about this. This is still untarget capped. I imagine that this might get a target cap, but as of now, it does not. The other level 25 talents, then, Power Siphon. This is a 30-second cooldown that sacrifices up to 2 wild imps and generates 2 charges of Demonic Core. This also makes your Demon Bolt do 30% additional damage with those 2 charges of Demonic Core. So that's fine. It's not particularly exciting. It's a bit more work to kind of smooth out your rotation with more Demonic Cores. I guess you could use it for some guaranteed mobility. There's, I think, a Legendary that synergizes with Demon Bolt. But still kind of underwhelming, I feel, compared to Demonic Calling. And then finally we have Doom, which now causes 1,200 shadow damage after 16 seconds, and it's going to generate 1 soul shard when it goes off. So a bit of multi-dotting. This is not a curse, so you can have your curses up and still put a Doom on the target. It's not going to overwrite that. Again, this seems okay, but for the most part, I feel like you're just going to take Demonic Calling all the time, right? Which, I mean, it's maybe not great talent design in that sense, but at least they've tried to balance them somewhat, so there you go. Okay, then the other big change, actually a couple other changes. First up, Howl of Terror. This is a new talent to replace your Demonic Circle. Demonic Circle now being baseline, which is fantastic. Howl of Terror is a 40-second cooldown, 1.2 second cast, and this will fear up to 5 enemies within 10 yards for 20 seconds. So it disorients. So it just applies your fear essentially in AoE, which is great. So it's an AoE stop, which is nice to bring to Mythic Plus. You can bring, spammable fears. You have your Axe Toss, you have your Shadow Fury, and now you can bring an AoE fear. Could be useful in PvP as well, although of course it has a cast time, so it can be kicked, or you can be stunned out of it or interrupted or anything like that. But yeah, definitely nice to see that come in. And again, it kind of solidifies level 40 row is going, okay, the instant cast single target in cap, that heals me a bit. AoE fear, AoE disorient, or make my AoE stun better. So I think that's a nice change to the level 40 row on the whole. On the final tier then, we've got one final very big change, which is demonic consumption. This has been reworked. I think in BFA, it made your demon commander just eat all of your wild imps to power him up. What this now does is he now drains 15% of the life from your demon servants to empower himself. So from all of your demons. And this is essentially what fueled this build with Summon Vile Fiend and the Grimoire Felguard. So getting out these 2 extra demons, making sure I've got my Dreadstalkers out as well, get a few Wild Imps out, then pop my Summon Demonic Tyrant. He's going to take 15% of the life from all of them, but they'll all still be alive. And then he, of course, is going to get super powered by this. He's going to do way more damage. And of course, he is also going to be buffing them all, increasing all of their duration. So this is really fantastic. This is really good. Yeah, I mean, again, I feel like compared to Demonic Calling, this also sort of overshadows the other talents on the tier. So Sacrifice Souls, Shadow Bolt, Demon Bolt, do more damage per demon you summoned. Pretty boring. Nether Portal is obviously very cool, and I think they did buff this slightly, but it's still kind of clunky to work with. This is just awesome. So yeah, I do feel like perhaps there's maybe a little bit of cookie cutterness going on with the Demonology Warlock talents, but it's certainly a fun playstyle with your multiple summons and the new demonic consumption effect, and of course Demonic Tyrant generating soul shards baseline. It makes for a super satisfying cooldown and super satisfying gameplay. Demonic Calling smooths out your rotation. It's going to let you get out more Hand of Gul'dans as well, so that's awesome. So yeah, the talent tree, it's not the best talent tree in the world, but at least there are some interesting talents there and some nice buffs and some nice perks to those. So there you are. That is the Demonology Warlock talent tree and the changes that are there. For the conduits for your Demonology Warlock, these slot into your soulbind trees, and there'll be an example of a tree in the background here. And you can get an idea for the sort of, the path that you can choose to take through a tree and the different sockets that are going to be there. There's Endurance Conduits, which boost your survivability, Finesse Conduits, which boost your utility, and Potency Conduits, which boost your damage. Let's look at the Endurance ones first. There are 3 right now for the Warlock. The first one is Accrued Vitality. Drain life will heal you for X% of the amount drained over 10 seconds. So that starts at 44% and can rank up to 100%. So, kind of nifty. Could be useful for some solo play. Maybe see some use for survivability in PvP. I'm not really sure. But it's a decent one. The next one is more interesting to me, which is Diabolic Bloodstone. Your Health Stone grants you 20% leech for 10 seconds when used, and this scales up to 34% leech. So again, if you synergize this with your Bile Scourge Bombers, if you're talented into that, or you synergize this with your Demonic Tyrant, you're going to be doing a lot of damage and healing yourself for an absolute ton with that leech. So this makes your Healthstone a much more interesting and very interactive defensive cooldown, a healing cooldown for yourself. So this is, I think, a really, really nice one. And then finally, we have Resolute Barrier. Attacks received that deal at least 5% of your health decrease Unending Resolve's cooldown by 10 seconds. This cannot occur more than once every 30 seconds. As you can see, the ranks as they're represented here are kind of weird, so I'm not exactly sure what this is going to do in that sense. But yeah, it should be pretty easy to trigger this every 30 seconds in, a raid fight, and it's going to trigger pretty frequently every 30 seconds in a Mythic Plus. So yeah, it's just more cooldown reduction on Unending Resolve, which is kind of nifty. So it's going to depend. I feel this is going to be, do you need Unending Resolve more frequently in Mythic Plus? Or are you pushing high level Mythic Plus and you need that? This could be good. Is it going to sync up with damage patterns of a raid fight? Is it going to be important for surviving an arena? That sort of thing. So it could have some uses for sure. So it's a decent one, I suppose. Then we have the Finesse Conduits for the Warlock. There are supposed to be 4, though the 4th one is still work in progress. It's still coming soon. We have 3 right now, though. The first one is Demonic Momentum. Demonic Circle increases movement speed by X% for 5 seconds. This starts at 30% and goes up to 58%. So this is obviously amazing for some arena play. Get a bit more mobility out there, do some kiting plays. Could see some use as well in PvE too. So this is one that's in niche circumstances, I think, going to be pretty decent. Fel Celerity is next, and this one is a little bit of a feels bad conduit, I have to say. This reduces the cooldown of Fel Domination by 45 seconds. It looks like this scales up to 90 seconds cooldown reduction, so at maximum rank, this would bring Fel Domination, which is your spell, to almost instantly resummon a demon from 3-minute cooldown to a 1.5-minute cooldown. I say this is a feels bad thing because honestly, why do we not just have short demon summoning cooldowns anyway? Why do we need Fel Domination? So it's a little bit of a kick in the teeth that they made your summon slower and gave you Fel Domination in the first place, and now you have to have a conduit to make it better. So I'm not very impressed with this one at all. Yeah, not too impressed. Then the final finesse conduit for now is Shade of Terror. Damage required to break your fear effects is increased by X%. This starts at 100% and scales up to 170%. So this could be really good for some PvP action, for sure. A little bit risky though in some PvE content. Sometimes it's going to be great, you know, your fear is going to last a bit longer and that's going to be fantastic. There is of course the risk, for example in Mythic Plus, you're fighting a mob pack and you fear one of the enemies to interrupt a cast or something, and that enemy starts making a beeline all terrified to another mob pack, and you're going, oh god, break the fear quick or he is going to aggro this other mob pack, and that makes this conduit would make that harder to break. That could be kind of bad. So yeah, there's pros and cons to this one, which I think is fine. I think it's kind of fun. So some niche circumstances where this is useful. For the Demonology Potency conduits then, which are upping your damage, there are 4. The first one is Born of Blood. Hand of Gul'dan has a 15% chance to generate a charge of demonic core, and this looks like it scales up to 30%, so this is fantastic. This is a really, really good one. One of the problems with the Demonology Warlock is that unless you have demonic core procs, you have no mobility really at all. Right, because Shadow Bolt and Hand of Gul'dan, which are your main spells you're casting, both have a cast time. So this is awesome. It's going to give you more consistent demonic core procs, which means more mobility with those instant casts. It's also really damn good because it also speeds up your rotation, and this is going to proc quite frequently. So whenever you get those demonic cores, again, you're generating more soul shards, which means casting more Hand of Gul'dan. If you got the potency conduit, that means getting more charges of demonic core, and it just kind of nicely feeds into itself. I think this is going to make your gameplay feel a lot better, so a very pleasant conduit to get there. The next one, Carnivorous Stalkers. Your Dread Stalker attacks have a 10% chance to trigger an additional Dread Bite. It looks like this might scale from 10% to about 15%. So the Dread Bite is just, you know, they do an extra chunk of damage. This one is pretty straightforward. There's not too much going on here. It's just a damage boost to your Dread Stalkers, which is fine. Does synergize a bit with a couple of the talents in there. So that's kind of nice, but not too exciting, really. Fel Commando is next. This makes your Fel Guard do 10% more damage and take 10% less damage. And this scales up to about 20% more damage and 20% less damage for the Fel Guard. This is going to feel, I think, really good for some solo content, like in Torghast. The Fel Guard is a little bit squishy, and again, with those nerfs to the demon summoning, when your Fel Guard dies, okay, you could use your Fel Domination and get one back really fast. If he dies a second time, you're kind of screwed, because that's a 5-second cast to get him back again, which is rough, really rough. So making him tankier is going to be great for solo play. The Fel Guard doing more damage is going to be, you know, again, it's going to be pretty good. You can obviously talent into, what's it called? The one that gives him like a Super Blade Storm at level 15. If you're not going for Bile Scourge Bombers, you can take the Super Blade Storm thing. So that's going to work well with that for some burst AoE. I think this one is you know, pretty decent. I might like to see the Fel Guard be a bit tankier, just baseline though, or just revert the summoning changes, please. That would be nice too. And then finally we have Tyrant Soul. After your Demonic Tyrant expires, gain a Demonic Core and 10% increased damage from your demons for 15 seconds. This goes up to 24% increased damage from your demons. So I expect that you're probably going to be running this one quite frequently. Makes your burst window extend even further after the Demonic Tyrant, which is awesome. Again, this one flows really well. I think this is based off of like Azerite traits or something from BFA. I didn't play Demo in BFA, so not too expert on that, but I mean, considering your Demonic Tyrant is giving you a bunch of soul shards now baseline when you summon him, that means you're going to be getting lots of wild imps out, which means, and also because he's keeping your Fel Stalkers going for longer, those things are going to be expiring towards the end of your Demonic Tyrant, and you're going to get lots and lots of demonic cores, which means you're going to summon lots and lots of demons afterwards, and this synergizes really nicely with that. I suspect that you're nearly always going to be running this conduit. Maybe not in PvP if it's not reliable to get that burst damage window out. I'm not really sure, but it's certainly a good one. Yeah, I expect you're going to be running this nearly all the time and just making that Demonic Tyrant window bigger and better. For your legendaries for the Demonology Warlock, you have 4 General Warlock legendary powers. We're going to look at those first, and then there are 4 Demonology Warlock specific legendary powers as well. Of course, at the start of the expansion, and as far as we know, you're only going to be able to equip 1 legendary at a time, so make your choice carefully. For the General Warlock legendary powers, there are, of course, 4. The first one is Claw of Endereth. Drain life, now deals damage and restores health 50% faster. So maybe sort of useful in some solo play. And maybe sees some use in PvP for a bit more self-sustain. But I think generally speaking, this one is quite underwhelming. Mark of Borrowed Power is next. Call Dreadstalkers has a 25% chance to refund all soul shards spent. Now, warning here on this one, and I don't know if this is intended or if it's a bug, but of course when we looked at the talents, I kind of gushed over how good Demonic Calling was, which makes your Call Dreadstalkers have a almost guaranteed chance to cost no soul shards, which is fantastic. The way this works right now, which is really silly, is it literally refunds the soul shards spent, which means, well, if you have that talent and you just did a Call Dreadstalkers for free, you have a 20% chance to refund 0 soul shards because it was free. So it's not like you're going to cast the free Dreadstalkers and get 2 soul shards back, which would be really cool. That is not how that works right now, though, so do bear that in mind. And you're probably running that talent, so unless they fix this, this is pretty much a dead legendary for Demonology Warlock. Oops, fix soon, please, Blizzard. The third legendary here is a pretty good one. This is the Pillars of the Dark Portal. Demonic Gateway is now instant cast, and your first use of the gateway does not trigger its cooldown. So Demonic Gateway by default has a 2-second cooldown. 2-second cast time. This legendary is awesome, right? You could definitely make some very interesting plays with this in Arena, for example. You know, instant cast Demonic Gateway, enemy team can't kick it, can't stop you from doing it. And then you could take the gateway, they run after you, and you take the gateway right on back. You know, definitely some creative plays you can do with this one. Could be helpful for your team and raiding as well. Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting uses. So a very, very fun utility legendary. And then finally we have Wilfred's Sigil of Superior Summoning. Every soul shard you spend reduces the cooldown of Summon Demonic Tyrant by 0.3 seconds. So, you know, you're not quite getting 1 second of cooldown reduction with each fully powered Hand of Gul'dan, but it's close to that. This one is obviously kind of nice. The one thing to watch out for with this one is if you are taking talents, this can really, it can clash with the talents pretty badly. So for example, Summon Vile Fiend is a 45-second cooldown. So with Demonic Tyrant by default being a 90-second cooldown, it's like I do one Vile Fiend with Demonic Tyrant, I do another Vile Fiend on its own, and then Vile Fiend and Demonic Tyrant both come off cooldown together. This does desync them a lot, so it will have some anti-synergy with some of the talents, which is a bit of a bummer. Although I will say this could end up being pretty powerful because Demonic Tyrant is such a powerful cooldown. So this is certainly one to keep an eye on for pretty much all the Warlock specs, certainly for Destruction, and I think for Demonology as well. This could end up being pretty good, so yeah, one to watch out for. The Demonology specific legendary powers then we have 4. The first is Implosive Potential. When implosion damages at least 3 targets, gain 5% haste for 8 seconds for each imp exploded. So this is of course based off of your Explosive Potential Azurite trait. The difference here, one of the big differences, is this needs to hit 3 targets. So this is not going to be any good at all in single target fights. This is all about that AoE damage. It's giving you lots of haste, so you summon in more imps, implode more imps, all that good stuff. So I think for AoE, this is going to be, you know, a pretty fun legendary. It's going to make your implosion be more rewarding. It's going to speed up your AoE rotation. It's going to be pretty good. Maybe a bit boring that it's simply an Azurite trait kind of come back, and it does have the downside of needing 3 targets, but I think it's fine. It's there. I think it's okay, and it will feel good in AoE at least. Grim Inquisitor's Dread Calling is the second one here. Each soul shard spent on Hand of Gul'dan increases the damage of your next called Dreadstalkers by 3%. So you should get a pretty good buff out of this. Like, obviously, you're spending a lot of soul shards on Hand of Gul'dan as a Demonology Warlock between those 20-second casts of called Dreadstalkers. It's certainly not interesting, particularly in terms of gameplay. A bit of utility with some conduits and some of the some talents that buff called Dreadstalkers, but it's pretty much a very, very passive thing. So it could end up being good numerically, but it's not all that interesting gameplay-wise. Forces of the Horned Nightmare. This one I think is more fun gameplay-wise. Hand of Gul'dan has a 15% chance to cast a second time on your target for free. Pretty good, right? Pretty good. So again, it's going to reward you for casting it at 3 soul shards, which you should be doing anyway, but it's going to make that better. There's definitely some randomness to this, but getting out more wild imps, of course, those wild imps are going to have chances to give you demonic core, so chances to speed up your rotation. They're going to do good damage. They're going to power up your implosion for some more AoE damage, and they're also going to, you know, power up your demonic tyrant even more and get more benefit out of that. So this one, it's kind of random, but it's that random proc chance to kind of just speed up your rotation and make your rotation more impactful, which I actually think is pretty good, pretty fun. So this is looking like one of my favorite ones for Demonology Warlock. And then finally we have the Bale Spider's Burning Core. Shadow Bolt increases the damage of your next Demon Bolt by 25%, stacking up to 4 times. I think this one is, again, a little bit awkward. Yeah, this one's a little bit awkward. I mean, it's okay. It's not the most exciting thing in the world. I think this is pretty much there to synergize with the Power Siphon talent, which you can now use to instantly give you a charge of Demon Bolt and to empower them by 30%. So I think the idea is that you would get this and cast a few Shadow Bolts, get some stacks on this, and then use the Power Siphon, and then throw out some really chunky Demon Bolts for some instant burst damage, which is fine. I mean, this might be useful, maybe in PvP or something. I'm not sure. This seems a little bit uninteresting to me in PvE. I'd probably rather just have the Force of Horn Nightmare and just get more demonic cores and get more Hand of Guldans and more wild imps, but it's okay and it's there. So yeah, there you go. On the whole, I think the legendaries actually for the Demonology Warlock aren't the best, really. They're kind of mediocre. Like, they're kind of, some of them are kind of fun, and there's some interesting utility stuff in the general powers, but certainly compared to some other specs, they're not as interesting as they could be, I think. For the Covenant abilities, we're going to be looking at the Kyrians first. For the Warlock, their signature ability is the Summon Steward. It's like another Health Stone, right? He gives you a File of Serenity. It has 3 charges. You can use 1 charge per combat. This restores 15% of your health and removes all curses, diseases, poisons, and bleed effects on you. There's quite a lot of these in Shadowlands, so this is looking like a pretty nice utility effect and a good defensive cooldown whenever those effects are in a fight and they're dangerous. So a nice, kind of nifty one right there. And then the Warlock Covenant ability is Scouring Tithe. This does a chunk of spell power's arcane damage instantly, and then a slightly bigger chunk as a dot over 18 seconds. If the enemy dies while affected by Scouring Tithe, you generate 5 soul shards. If they survive, though, it just refreshes the cooldown. The cooldown is 40 seconds by default. It has a 2-second cast time. So yeah, I mean, if you're against a boss and the boss isn't going to die from it, you're basically just permanently keeping this dot up and you're casting it every 18 seconds. Where this gets interesting is certainly when you combine the on death effect, and especially with the conduit that you can get for this called Soul Tithe. This makes it so that when a target dies under the effect of Scouring Tithe, you gain 10% increased damage from your demons for 10 seconds. This in fact goes up to 24% increased damage for your demons from 10 seconds. So there's a lot, I think, of skilled play that could potentially go into this if you can sync that effect up with your demonic tyrant. So again, potentially like superpower how many demons you're going to have out during your demonic tyrant and get like just tons more damage and just stack those damage amps all on top of each other. That could be very powerful. The downside for me is that it's definitely it's a little bit awkward because there's quite a lot of setup in terms of the demonology toolkit already, like getting ready for your tyrant. You're already casting a lot of spells, so it's going to be awkward. You know, there's already the skill element of making sure that you get this on an enemy, making sure that it dies at the right time, making sure that you have no soul shards to get the full benefit of the 5 soul shard generation. I think that's a little bit tricky. I think it's easier to use this, for example, with Affliction, where your soul shard generation is slower. But yeah, like there's definitely potential for this, a lot of skilled play, but it might be kind of difficult to use, which does make it a little bit off-putting. But certainly it is one to keep an eye on, because there could be some cool plays that you could make with this, getting some crazy burst damage out if you use it properly. The Venthyr are next. Their signature ability is Dwarf Shadows. This is a 1-minute cooldown, 1.5 second cast time, and a 35-yard range. And this is just a point-and-click teleport, which is really nice. So again, teleporting is your new favorite hobby if you're a Venthyr Warlock. You're going to have your demonic circle baseline. You, of course, have your gateway. Now you can have Dwarf Shadows as well. So just porting all over the place. The Covenant ability for the Warlocks that are of the Venthyr Covenant is Impending Catastrophe. This has a 2-second cast and a 1-minute cooldown. You call forth a cloud of chaotic anima that travels to the target enemy. This does a chunk of spell power shadow damage to all the enemies in its path, and when it reaches the target, it explodes, doing a very big chunk of spell power as a shadow damage dot over 12 seconds to everything nearby, and it also inflicts them with either Curse of Weakness or Curse of Tongues. So this is pretty straightforward and very effective. Nice AoE damage ability. So yeah, every minute throw this out. It's going to do a nice big chunk of AoE damage, and also has a wonderful utility effect of throwing out those curses, right? Because that's definitely going to slow you down if you're going to be using those curses a lot. Every single curse to put on every single enemy is a GCD. That's quite a lot of time lost. This applies them automatically. Now, one problem with this right now is that it's not smart about how it does it. So it could easily put Curse of Weakness on a caster and put Curse of Tongues on a melee fighter. So maybe they will update this eventually to be smart cursing and to put Curse of Tongues always on the casters, Curse of Weakness on the melee. Maybe they'll go through and manually flag that sort of stuff for Mythic Plus, whatever. It doesn't do that right now, though, so do bear that in mind. But, I mean, it's still a useful way to throw them on. They'll have some use, mostly, regardless. The conduit for this is also pretty good. It's called Catastrophic Origin. Impending catastrophes damage over time, and the inflicted curse lasts 50% longer against your primary target. This can actually scale up to about 100% longer. So this conduit essentially makes it much better for single target, which is awesome, right? It's great when you've got an AoE ability like this. It's great to have a conduit that makes it more useful in single target scenarios. Same thing for the Kyrians, how their conduit kind of made it even better for AoE scenarios. So yeah, there you go. Impending Catastrophe. I think this is really solid. This is really good. Looks great for Mythic Plus. Yeah, straightforward and lots of perks. Fun to play with, easy to play with. It's a nice one. The Necrolords then have the signature ability Fleshcraft. This has a 2-minute cooldown. You channel for 4 seconds to form a shield of flesh and bone that can absorb up to 20% of your maximum health. If you channel this near corpses, it sucks up their power and can be stronger. You can have a shield for up to 50% of your maximum health. The shield does last for 2 minutes, which is quite a long time, obviously. So you can definitely like build up a powerful shield and bring it into like a tough boss fight in Mythic Plus. You can use it and have it up and available for, you know, a soak mechanic in a raid or a big chunk of burst damage. So there's lots of creative uses for this. It's a nice defensive ability and very Warlock, I think, with the whole like sucking up the power from the corpses. I feel like that's a very Warlock type thing. The Covenant ability then is also very intriguing. This is called Decimating Bolt. This has a 45-second cooldown and quite a long 2.5-second cast time, but what this does, it throws a bolt of shadow magic at your target, which will do a chunk of shadow damage, just straight up, and it increases the damage of your next 3 shadow bolts by 200%. On top of that, the damage that Decimation Bolt itself does and the damage bonus it's giving to Shadow Bolt will both increase the lower your target's health is. So this is, you know, I think it's pretty straightforward for the Demonology Warlock. It's just a bit more damage. It's straightforward. It's easy to use. You're casting Shadow Bolts anyway. It's just going to really up their damage. It's going to make Shadow Bolts feel really nice to press. It's going to make it do big chunky damage. And of course, this is providing you a lot of execute damage. So even in AoE, this is pretty good. Like if one mob is quite low on health, you can hit that low health mob with Decimating Bolt, supercharge your next 3 Shadow Bolts and fire those into the highest health mob or like the boss or something like that to do an extra nice chunk of damage, which is pretty cool, I think. The conduit for this is Prolonged Decimation. This gives Shadow Bolts a 20% chance to not consume a charge of Decimating Bolt, and this actually goes up to 48% chance. So yeah, you're going to get lots of these superpowered Shadow Bolts out. This is just a really good boost to your single target priority damage, your execute damage. Yeah, I think this is certainly a fun one and does spice up that single target rotation a bit, which is awesome. The fourth and final Covenant then is the Night Fae. Soul Shape is their signature ability. You turn into a Vulpin, teleporting 15 yards forward and giving you 50% increased move speed for 12 seconds. You can reactivate that teleport every 4 seconds for an extra blink. Yeah, this is instant cast and has a 1.5 minute cooldown. So definitely kind of nicer for the Warlock, you know, instead of turning on Burning Rush. And I'm not gonna, you know, point fingers here, but, you know, we may have a Warlock in our guild who has been known, even in fact on fights like Mythic Ashara, to forget to turn Burning Rush off and to take literally millions of damage over the course of a fight because of that. So yeah, you can have a nice mobility cooldown now without, you know, relying on Burning Rush for some burst mobility. Oh, it's pretty nifty, right? It's a lot of mobility in that cooldown. You can potentially do some very creative plays with that. It's up to you guys to figure out how you can use it. The Covenant ability, though, for the Warlock is pretty underwhelming. This is called Soul Rot. You wither away all life force of your current target and up to 3 additional targets nearby, causing them to suffer some nature damage over 8 seconds, and then it lets Drain Life be cast on any enemy affected by your Soul Rot, or well, I guess the better way to put it would be your next drain life will hit all enemies affected by soul rot. This does have a downside that it does cost you 20% of your maximum health to cast this. It has a 1 minute cooldown and a 1.5 second cast. So definitely some downsides to this. Number one, okay, it's not doing all that much damage, and it is very much also reliant on AoE, right? If you're only fighting one target, this is basically useless. Certainly the second effect, I can cast Drain Life and it's going to hit my target. Well, it's single target, so you're draining life off them anyway. That effect is kind of useless. Even in AoE, the damage, I think, isn't all that great. And draining life on multiple targets, it's going to heal you for a lot. So this could be good as a very big burst self-healing cooldown. But it's, apart from that, the damage output's just, I don't think the damage output is quite there. The conduit for this is called Exhumed Soul. Soul Rot damage and radius is increased by 20%, but it costs 7% more health. I'm not sure why they added an even bigger downside onto that. But anyway, this can scale up to, it looks like maybe about 50% increased damage and radius for Soul Rot. Potentially this could see some sort of use in, like, let's say Arena, if you're going to be focused quite a bit. But the enemy team is not going to be able to kick you that often. Like, you could hit them with the Soul Rot, and then you could drain life off multiple targets at the same time and really make yourself very tanky and very survivable. It could be kind of cool for that. But with the other conduit abilities being kind of useful in lots of different types of content, I feel like the very much AoE limitation of this, like, you really want to have 4 targets. If there's 3 targets, it's okay. With 2 or 1 target, it's quite weak. So that makes this quite off-putting. This is definitely looking like the weakest Warlock Covenant by far through its Covenant ability. So there you are. So that's it, guys. They are all the pieces of the Demonology Warlock on the Shadowlands beta. How is the spec looking? Number 1, is it fun? And number 2, is it going to play well? Is it going to be good? The answer to the fun question is absolutely 100% yes. Oh my lord. I had so much fun playing Demonology Warlock. For me, this was the most fun Warlock spec. By quite a big chunk, actually. Affliction was also fun. Affliction is cool because it's kind of slow-paced, and there's a lot of skill and interesting play you can do with, like, snapping low-health mobs with Drained Soul and with Unstable Affliction to generate more soul shards. And obviously, multi-dotting is kind of interesting in AoE, so that was quite cool. But in single-target, it was kind of slow and a little bit boring. And Destruction was awesome with Infernal up, but that was only up every 3 minutes, and it felt kind of bad outside of that. Well, Demonology is awesome, though. Demonology is great. The core rotation of Demonology, for me, was very, very simple, but very, very satisfying. I love it. It's just, you know what? Summoning in a bunch of demons to fight for you is just freaking cool. It's badass. It is badass. And what I really liked is that their core rotation is actually quite fast-paced, right? Shadow Bolts generating a guaranteed soul shard every time. Your Demonic Core Demon Bolts generating 2 soul shards every time. It gives a very quick pace to the spec, like you're always casting spells, you're always building towards something, stuff is always happening, and it all looks awesome. And yeah, I also like the reactivity of it, where you're responding to your demonic cores, and you can use those instant casts. Number 1, they speed up your rotation a lot. They also are what allow you to move, but they come in kind of randomly. And that ends up being quite fun because you're reacting to the demonic cores. Like, if you're getting several procs at a time, you're summoning in even more demons, which means you're going to get even more demonic cores. And you're kind of planning out around that and making sure you're not going to overcap and spend your resources properly. It's quite a fun little core rotation. And, you got some cool talents, like Bile Scourge Bombers is badass. It does a ton of damage. Feels great in AoE. You got some nice stuff happening there. And then a massive perk for the class that I absolutely love is Summon Demonic Tyrant. This is arguably, I think, possibly my favorite major cooldown in the game. This thing is awesome. What I love about this, and this is controversial, this seems to be kind of like the wrong opinion to have amongst WoW PvE players at the moment, but this is the opinion I have, and I'm actually, I think it makes sense. I think it's fair, which is I actually enjoy specs with ramp up. This seems to be a dirty thing. It seems like right now people hate GCDs. They hate cooldowns. They just want to, you pull the mob, and within 1 second you're just doing your core rotation, pressing your core buttons. They don't like having GCDs. They don't like having spells or buffs or stuff like that. In some specs, I like having specs that do that, though. For me, I really do. And Demonology, I think, does it really well. Again, you can see in the footage here in the background, like, I had talented into as many summons as possible, and it's just very satisfying to go into a fight and to spend, you know, like 10 seconds getting set up, right? Making sure that you generate your soul shards efficiently, that you're going to spend them efficiently, summon up as many demons as possible, have as many demons out, and then summon in your demonic tyrant. And that demonic tyrant just being super powered because of that setup. If you do that setup properly, if you do it correctly, you get the reward, and you get to see yourself just shoot up the damage meters and absolutely start blasting. And certainly right now in the beta, oh boy, does Demonology Warlock blast. Like, it goes ham. It's awesome. But yeah, I just find that really satisfying. I think it's great. I really enjoy that playstyle. I think it's cool because it gives you that sense of, you know, if you prepare for something properly, you get that reward, you reap that reward. And again, you look awesome while you're doing it. And of course, the summon Demonic Tyrant also makes your rotation feel great because it gives you so many soul shards. And that just, again, it speeds up your whole rotation with more demonic cores and more summoning. And yeah, everything just feeds into itself and feels awesome. And again, compared to Destruction, the criticism I had of Destruction was that you do get that awesome cooldown in Summon Infernal, but it's a 3-minute cooldown, which feels like you're waiting for that for an eternity. Right, you know, the 2.5 minutes between Summon Infernals are a little bit depressing as Destruction, where you feel kind of terrible. You don't have that anywhere near as much with Demonology because Demonic Tyrant is a 1.5 minute cooldown. You get this up twice as often as Destruction gets Summon Infernal. So that's great. You're always, you know, whenever you're always working towards, and it's always in the near future, your next Demonic Tyrant, which is great. So, you know, you see it coming up. It's like coming up in 30 seconds, and you can start planning for that. You can make sure your cooldowns are up. You kind of think about, okay, well, am I going to use this on this mob pack? Am I going to use it on the next mob pack? Oh, maybe there's a boss coming up. I can delay a little bit here with my Demonic Tyrant. You know, you can plan around it. And you're always working towards that next Demonic Tyrant. It's never too far away, which I think is important. And it's great. It means that every minute and a half, you're like in super badass mode. And you're planning for that 30 seconds in advance each time. And yeah, it flows great. It's super, super fun. Love it. Absolutely love it. I think some of the Conduits and Legendaries are kind of interesting as well, and they're going to help you out with that. I will say one certain weakness, a couple of weaknesses for sure with the Demonology Warlock. I will say that their Legendaries are not the most interesting at all. They're not too great. Like, they're okay, but they're not great. So that's certainly a problem. I also think that the talent tier, the talent system for the Demonology Warlocks is looking a little bit cookie cutter. You're not going to have anywhere near as much customizability as it looks like, for example, the Affliction Warlock is going to have. Like, the Affliction Warlock can really tailor it and be very different for, like, AoE situations. They can get more dots. They can affect their cooldowns a lot. There's a lot of stuff it looks like they can do. Possibly Destruction Warlock will have the same thing with what I was talking about with the Fire Destruction Warlock build. So that looks like a potential very different way to play. That could be good. Or possibly Destruction Warlock will end up being cookie cutter once again. Who knows? But Demonology Warlock, certainly their talents, it does not look like you have as much variety at all compared to some of the other specs. I was kind of running with the build that was, you know, summon as many demons as possible, and it felt great. And yeah, I mean, I just didn't see all that much reason to ever move away from that build. So that is certainly a downside. I do think at least the Covenant abilities for Warlock are pretty solid. You know, the Night Fae one is pretty bad. So, you know, not going to be great if you want to be a Night Fae. Warlock is probably not for you, looks like right now. But the Necrolord one is great. Decimating Bolt gives you really good single target damage, really good priority damage, great execute damage. So that's going to be awesome. The Venthyr one is just a nice, straightforward, and very powerful AoE ability, which is going to be wonderful for Mythic Plus. And the Kyrian one, the Scouring Tithe, is, you know, it's just an extra dot in single target. It's kind of a pain in the ass in single target. And it's also kind of a pain in the ass at multiple targets as well. But you do have that skill cap. So this could be a good one if you're looking for that more of a skill cap here, more of a ceiling, where, you know, if you kill a target with Scouring Tithe on it, that it is going to power up all of your demons with the Conduit for 10 seconds, and it's going to give you 5 soul shards. I felt like that certainly worked a bit better with Affliction, where your soul shard generation is very slow. It's gonna be like, I think that would be difficult with Demonology, because like you already have that very specific ramp up to your Demonic Tyrant. It's gonna be hard to time your Scouring Tithe to kill things while you're at 0 soul shards and generate them up, and to overlap perfectly with Demonic Tyrant. Like, that seems very hard to do properly. But it could be very rewarding if you pull it off. So that's something to keep an eye on, I guess. But yeah, there you are. I will say, again, a couple of critical points here which have to be made as well. and go across all the Warlock specs, and also a bit specifically for Demonology, the increased summon time on the demons just feels terrible. I don't really understand why that's a thing. And I also have to say, I'm maybe a little bit over having the Felguard as your only demon, really, for Demonology. That's kind of a little underwhelming. I know I've seen suggestions floating around the place. It could be like a Beastmaster Hunter, where it's like you always have a Felguard out no matter what as Demonology, and he could interact with your active abilities. But then you could have just a normal demon like the other Warlocks, and again, you could have that choice for which one to have. That could be kind of cool and kind of fun. Obviously, that's not what's in there right now, and you're just going to run with the Felguard all the time. I feel like that's kind of a bummer. Like, he's cool and everything, but it's kind of sad that you don't get to use your other demons as Demonology. That seems kind of weird. Anyway, that's just something to consider. But yeah, the increased summoning times is rough. I don't know why they put in the increased summon times. I feel like that's a terrible change. That's nerfing something that, as far as I can tell, really didn't need to be nerfed. So yeah, that's a real big bummer. And I'm not a fan of how they've added the interrupt to Axe Toss. Again, it's like, it was Demonology, like this mega meta spec that was pushing all other specs out of the meta. Like, it was no Resto Druid in Mythic Plus. It's no Fire Mage in Ny'alotha raid. It's not this spec that is just way too crazy good. I don't understand why you can't just give the damn spec a kick, a normal kick. Like, whatever, 24-second kick, a standard range kick. Why not? Why is that not a thing? I don't get it. I don't really see why that has to be a punishment to Demonology Warlocks in particular. That just seems mean. The Axe Toss is frustrating. You have to use your 30-second stun for that instead. It has a travel time. It's just a hassle. It's just a hassle. I don't get. Like I said, I don't know why. I don't know why it has to be this weird thing. Like, why not just give them a normal kick? Beats me. I don't really get it. But there you are, guys. That is Demonology Warlock in Shadowlands. There is, of course, always a concern about, with Warlock, right? What spec is going to be best? Because the spec that does the most damage is the spec that you're most likely going to be pushed towards playing. If you care about playing the best spec, which I know a good chunk of players do. I mean, certainly I do. So if you're in the same boat as me, you're going to be playing most likely whichever spec is going to be the strongest. And that there is some concern for Demonology there, in the sense that you're very bad with dealing with movement. You're entirely reliant on Demonic Core, which is random. You can't cast any really of your other damage spells on the move. They all have cast times, so you get punished very hard by movement. But more than that, in terms of damage profile, like, Affliction looks insane right now, because Affliction has insanely good spread cleave, right? If you got two mobs which are 20 yards away from each other, Affliction Warlock can dot them both. Malefic Rapture hits them both. It's so good for that, and it also brings insane execute damage. So yeah, it just looks phenomenal for raiding in particular. Destruction Warlock, again, has the split cleave thing going on with Havoc. So they can do insane burst damage, especially against two targets. So they have a very powerful damage niche of their own. That is something that Demonology Warlock doesn't have as much. Like, okay, they've got really big burst damage every minute and a half, so that's kind of cool. But then the rest of their damage profile is kind of just stacked cleave, and basically every melee spec in the game does stacked cleave, and like the mages all do stacked cleave and all that sort of stuff. So it's not as unique as the split cleave of the other Warlock specs. So that can be a concern, where it's more likely that the damage profile of the other Warlock specs is more likely to make them better, which can push Demonology away a little bit. But that being said, the most important question to me at this point, for sure, is the spec fun? And again, to reiterate, Demonology Warlock, out of the 3 Warlock specs I played, was the most fun. In fact, compared to most of the casters I played, this was the most fun. This spec is really good. I absolutely love it. It's got a fun core rotation, looks amazing, sounds amazing. It's just really badass summoning in a bunch of demons. And I really enjoyed Summon Demonic Tyrant as a cooldown. I think it's really unique. Preparing for it, ramping up, getting your summons out, and then getting that big juicy payoff. This is a great spec. I could easily see myself playing this and having an absolute blast in Shadowlands. So yeah, there you go, guys. That is the Demonology Warlock. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.